Workers, what is your best, well, I'm getting fired moment at work? What were the consequences? Story 1. Working as an executive assistant to a VP, and she asks me to go online and pay a speeding ticket that her son, a grown man I'll have you know, got. Now, her son is notorious for getting speeding tickets, and then she pays a lawyer to contest them because if he pleaded guilty and she paid them all, they would take away his license. I go online and am not paying attention, so instead of clicking just the one ticket to pay, I select all, about 4 or 5 of them, and proceed to pay them. The minute the transaction was approved, I realized my mistake and started to panic. I find the contact number and call them in my panic mode and beg them to reverse the payment, explain my situation, and told them I was going to get fired over this. 0 Fs were given. I now have to go in and tell my boss that not only did I just charge about $1,500 to her credit card, but I can't reverse it, and her son is probably going to lose his license because of it. She was not amused, but I didn't get fired. I did, however, cost her an additional $1,000 or so in lawyer fees to have them fix my F up, and she hasn't asked me to pay another one of his tickets since. Story 2. I work at a major electronic retail store in Canada. It was the day of the Xbox One release day. We only received a limited amount of consoles as expected. There is no room for an infinite amount of consoles. So a guy came in at night and was looking around the store and whatnot. I asked him if he needed any help, and he just kind of snubbed me off. So I let him be. A few minutes later, he came back up to me and asked me very rudely if we have any more of the consoles left. So I told him that we were sold out and we can put his name down on a waiting list. So he proceeds to tell me how much of a worthless bag of crap I am because I don't have any Xboxes for him, and he came all the way just to get one and I can't help him. So he ended up buying some games, which I ran through for him. I asked him if he wanted a bag. He said, "A bag? Why the F would I want a bag? Just give me the games." So I gave it to him and said, "Have a nice day and go F yourself." Manager overheard me and pulled me into his office. I explained what happened, he laughed, high-fived me, and said he would have done the same thing. See, now that's a cool manager. If a customer is a D-bag, they should get treated like a D-bag. I've had enough of rude people in stores getting away with everything because heaven forbid there be even the most minor of consequences to their actions. Story 3. I found a hurt owl on my way to work. I was stunned, so I was able to pick it up. Another car stopped too when they saw what I was doing and gave me a trash bag. I put the owl in the trash bag and put it in the trunk of my car. I called Raptor Rescue and told them about the owl and said I could bring it after work, but they said I should keep an eye on it in case it takes a turn for the worst. So I had no choice but to bring the owl into my office. I transferred it to a printer box. One time when I went to check on it, it had recovered and flew around the entire floor of my office. It was amazing because its wingspan was nearly 5 feet and people could see its shadow move across their desk as it flew. It promptly crapped on my friend's file cabinet and landed on his cube wall. I ran to get it, but it flew away again and did another lap around the floor. Finally, I was able to grab the bird and place it back in the box. The VP was, to say the least, not pleased. I thought for sure that that was my last day at the company. No one ever said a word to me. But from that day forward, I quit bringing any wild or tame, used to bring my dog into work before his grooming appointments, animal into work. At that year's Christmas party, they sang the 12 Days of Christmas with the chorus, "And an owl flying in distress." Story 4. This was many years ago, working tech support/sales for an up-and-coming GoDaddy.com. I'm on a call with a customer who needs to reset her password. Since it's very difficult to turn a password reset call into a sale, we were required to wrap them up in under 10 minutes. This woman is awful, doesn't follow directions, and is completely computer illiterate. 30 minutes into the call, I'm still trying to explain the concept of highlighting text with her mouse, and my supervisor comes over and asks what the hell is taking so long. Frustrated and aggravated, I mash the mute button, and once the light turns red, I turn to him and say, "Sorry, this lady is a effing idiot." There's a brief moment of silence. I recall my supervisor's face morphing into a grin of understanding when suddenly I hear in my headset, "What?" Scumbag mute button. Worst part is, if I just called her an idiot without the adjective, I would have gotten off with a warning. There's a strict no swearing policy on the phone floor that no one, even the managers, followed. However, in the rare and unlikely case a customer heard you curse, you were fired without question. I mean, at that point, you know you're fired. Might as well just unload on that lady and get a little catharsis out of the whole situation. Story 5. 2 incidents. Boss had been rude to me for a while, and I wasn't over the last shift's abuse. Boss made an insulting comment about me loud enough so I would purposefully hear it. This is by far my biggest pet peeve. I went up to him, gave him my hat, and yelled, "I am sick of your crap." This was in front of all the employees. He responded, "Fine, go." I think I would have been fired/quit if I didn't immediately respond with, "Give me his boss's number." His mood changes quickly, and I ended up getting a raise. I would not suggest this tactic. Second incident was having a massive nosebleed. Took some generic medicine that I didn't recognize to deal with my constant coughing. Apparently, it had cleared up my sinuses that were infected. You know when you're biting into an onion ring and the whole onion strip decides to all fall out at once? You get all the onion on your chin. Imagine that only with nose blood. Also, instead of my chin, it was the customer's food in front of the customer. Story 6. I work in tech support for my university school of engineering. It was late and I was in the labs doing homework with people. After I finished, I was just wandering the halls because I was bored. One of my coworkers left his ID in a classroom. We use our IDs to unlock each classroom, so I had to let him in. Usually we only have to slide our wallet over this black box, and if our ID is in there, it will unlock. I decided that since my wallet is in my back pocket, all I'd have to do is put my butt up against the wall and the door would open. It was a little high, so I had to jump. I took a step, jumped up, spun around to scan my butt, and immediately put both feet through the drywall. I stuck the landing, made eye contact with the other employee, and walked away. I came back, slid a wet floor sign in front of the holes I made, and put a work order to have them filled. They were filled, and nobody besides me and that coworker ever knew I did it. Story 7. I worked for a privately owned restaurant/deli. The owners were married and terrible people. I would get a phone call and be demanded to work in the next few hours on threat of being fired if I quit. Anyways, one day I got in a big deal of trouble for giving a customer double meat without charging him. Now, I don't mean talking in the back office. I mean full-on being screamed at in front of customers. Anyway, after I back-talked, I was let go in front of a line of prospective buyers. As I walked out of the store, I looked over my shoulder and proudly said to my bosses, "Pooped in the cookie dough." This was a lie, but they didn't know it. We had a huge vat of it in the back. Our cookies were very popular, so it was a big deal to them. My coworker eventually told me, and the husband and wife devil duo looked through the dough and couldn't tell what was chocolate chip and what was my poop, even though I never actually did it. They threw out the whole vat, $500 to $1,000. Felt good. Edit. On threat of being fired if I didn't show up. I don't know how I got there. I mean, that's a pretty good way to get them, though thank heavens they didn't try to, charge you with anything for doing that. But I mean, even if they did, sounds like it was worth it. Story 8. I worked at a call center and was joking around with a friend of mine. She had just engaged in a relationship with another girl and was complaining that the intercourse wasn't very good, making jokes and saying that she wanted to play with her new girlfriend's butt, but her girlfriend was having none of it. Off mute, without missing a beat, I just looked at my friend and said, "So you like butt play, do ya?" And then, slowly, quietly, I hear the customer's voice. "You're off mute, just so you know." I went pale. As soon as the call was done, I approached my supervisor, who was and still is cool as hell. I've left there, but we still play games together all the time, and gave him a heads up in case a manager approaches him about it. Thankfully, it looks like the call went by unnoticed, in a time where we were having 20 to 25 calls a week listened to, and I only took about 10 a day. And I wasn't fired. Story 9. I worked in an automotive parts manufacturing factory while going to art college, and part of my job was boxing up parts and attaching a tag onto the box with thin wire. But for every box I completed, one every couple hours, I sculpted a little animal out of the wire with needle nose pliers. I gave the little sculptures, bears, rabbits, whatever, to random employees which they left on their workstation. One day I was making one of the little sculptures. I looked over my right shoulder to see my supervisor standing directly behind me just watching me with a clipboard. I paused, looked her dead in the eye, held out the sculpture and said, "Want a bear?" She fired me on the spot. I'm not an animator at Disney. Story 10. I had the bright idea to shoot off a potato gun in the parking lot of my company. I fired a few rounds across the road when the maintenance manager came running out screaming at me. I then realized I was shooting a firearm on company property. Doesn't matter if it's potatoes and right guard, it is still a projectile. My fellow supervisors who were watching all disappeared. Went back to my desk to await my manager. All I got was a "I trust this will not happen again" email. Still work for the company, and it occasionally gets brought up on my work anniversary. "I trust this will not happen again. Now, about that meeting we were going to have in the field in my backyard after work. I'll bring the 12-pack, you bring plenty of potatoes. Hell yeah." Story 11. My dad has a great one. He was a busboy at a restaurant, and it was his first day on the job. The place was packed, and he was rushing back and forth with a ton of dishes. Somehow the tray to carry them fell, and all the dishes fell on the floor with a loud crash. Everyone looked over at my dad. My dad saw that there was one lone dish intact, picked it up, held it out at arm's length, then dropped it. It broke. Everyone in the restaurant applauded. He was then fired. Story 12. In high school, I worked at an AM radio station in my small town on Sunday mornings. I was the only person there from 6 a.m. to noon. It was mostly reading the weather and playing pre-taped programs. At one point, I played a live broadcast of a Catholic Mass going on. During that time, I would crawl into a ball in the break room couch and doze off, hungover from the night before. One Sunday, I woke up to Hawkeye 1200, you can't sleep on the job. I sit up and see the boss who runs the station standing over me with a frown. "But I wasn't sleeping," I say. Just when I think he might buy it, he says, "You have an alarm clock next to you." Oh yeah, I brought in an alarm clock that I'd set so I didn't oversleep. Hard to explain that one. I thought I was screwed, but somehow he didn't fire me. I worked there another month and then left for college. Story 13. I worked for a small computer company doing a couple million a year in sales. One of my tasks was to update price listings and have those changes reflect on our vendor's website. I put one less O on one of the computer models and ended up costing our company $30,000 in about one day. Someone had noticed the error and bought a crap ton of computers. Even though there was a QA process to catch these things after me, I knew I was getting fired. Too long didn't read, I got fired. Edit, I should say that my boss was actually pretty cool about it, but they had to put the blame on someone. He told me I could still use them as a reference and that I could label the position as a short-term contract. Story 14. I was working at a cozy sandwich, soup, and salad place and had asked to leave early the previous day since my uncle died. I went back to work and was still in a state of shock and couldn't check my baggage at the door. I had this horribly B lady change her order 4 times during the lunch rush when I had a line out the door. I couldn't take it anymore and told her to either order or get the F out of my line. My manager heard me. Before he could say anything, I took my apron and hat off, handed it to him, and grabbed my stuff and left. I do not blame you at all. That would have been frustrating enough if you weren't dealing with such a big loss. Also, folks, I know you are paying for food, but you need to figure your stuff out and be considerate when you're a customer. Come on! Story 15. I use Adium to manage my IMs when I'm at work. I'm a developer. I was speaking to a project manager at a new job. I'd been there for maybe a month. She was asking me to do some tedious work that was completely unnecessary because they promised it to a client. While frustrated, I tabbed over to my girlfriend's IM to complain how frustrated I was that they were making us do all this work for basically nothing. Unfortunately, I didn't tab over. I sent the IM to the PM. My heart sank into my stomach. Saw the little icon that showed she was typing and was like, oh crap, how do I cover this up before she responds? I reread the comment and noticed I used a lot of pronouns, so when she responded, she thought I was talking to her about the client. Dear Lord, I thought I'd ruined my awesome new job right after it started. Story 16. I am a police dispatcher, and one time at work I was working the desk and Toys for Tots workers came in. My boss joked that I should ID them to make sure they weren't thieves. We laughed, and the gentleman took the 10 trash bags full of toys and left. Later that night, a man called and asked when they could pick up the toys. After telling them that 2 guys already picked the toys up, he informed me that we had most likely been robbed. He asked if I had ID'd them, and I said no. He spoke to my boss, and my boss then informed me that we would probably be on the news since a police station was robbed, which was ironic, and he flipped out on me. It turns out it was an off-duty cop calling to play a prank on me. Oh, I'm sorry, that's mean, but it is pretty funny. Story 17. I used to work at Best Buy. The boss wouldn't give me Labor Day weekend off, but I took it off and went up north anyway. Didn't call or show up for my shift on Saturday, showed up on Monday like nothing happened. I go up front to get a flatbed cart for a customer and proceed to ride it back to my department. As I'm riding on the cart, manager sees me and asks where I was this weekend. I yell, "Not here," without breaking stride as I glide past him on the cart. We had a very brief talk and agreed it was best I leave. Felt pretty awesome, I must say. Story 18. Well, this was actually kind of funny. I was hoping I didn't get fired and no one confronted me because it was not really my fault. I lived in fear of the day people would finally notice, though. My company came around the call center and took pictures of people in their everyday lives in order to put on our website. Well, me being cheery and dressed in a cute dress that day, I somehow managed to be on the front of our website as the face of our company. We have a few 100,000 visitors to our website a month. Little did they know, if you looked really closely at the writing on my desk, you could see I had a bumper sticker that said, "Life is too short to argue with stupid people. Win." Story 19. I'm a medical equipment repair technician. One night I was working on an exam light that was hanging from the ceiling in an operating room. I had a bit of it apart and was inspecting the connection between the big light head and the arm that it was suspended from when a clip popped out. The light head dropped to the floor. The arm is spring-loaded and it shot up and shattered the ceiling and 5 or 6 lights showering the operating table, anesthesia cart, and myself in ceiling tile, plastic, and glass. At first I was in shock and what just happened didn't register in my brain. I reached down to pick up the light head, which is about 3 foot across, and grabbed the arm with my other hand. While trying to put them back together, I realized I'm coating everything in blood. The OR staff came running in and just saw me surrounded by destruction and covered in my own blood. Fortunately, the charge nurse had a sense of humor. I mean, if there's any place to get hurt like that, it's in a hospital. Also, I doubt they would have ever wanted to fire you because otherwise someone else would have had to deal with that mess. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 20. I once was chatting with a higher-up manager about how a lot of people were away on the holidays. She said she may leave early but was stuck pulling a couple extra hours with all the people out getting their stuff handled. As she was walking away, what I wanted to say was, yeah, I don't want to have anyone working harder at their job than they have at this time of year. Or something like that. What came out of my mouth was, yeah, I don't want to have to make you do your job. She was already around a corner by this time I got that far, so my brain made me stop talking. Then I realized what I just said, but it was too late. She was already gone. I heard about it quite a bit from my direct supervisor later, but nothing came of it. Story 21. Not me, but a coworker. I worked at a grocery store, and one of my coworkers was gathering shopping carts outside. He was just minding his own business when, out of nowhere, some cops pulled up. They got out, put him in handcuffs, then proceeded to throw him in the car. Last I saw him. I can imagine him seeing them and thinking, damn it. Story 22. A client came in and I confirmed on an old statement the client's personal bank account number. The client waved it away, saying it was correct. I thought it was an old statement, so how could we possibly have written the wrong bank account number on the statement? Turns out someone had used the statement as a template and changed the account number and saved over the original document. So when I printed it, I was printing an altered document. Client confirmed that as her account number. I transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars into a random account and swore up and down that I had transferred it into the client's account. Wow, I must have turned a whiter shade of pale. Story 23. A few years ago, I was reading The Road by Cormac McCarthy while on my lunch break. Highly recommended, by the way. At one point, I came across a word I was unfamiliar with context in which it was used gave me no clue as to what it could have meant. This was before I had a smartphone, so I wrote the word down and decided to look it up online when I got back to the office. The word was catamite. Wait until you're at home to look it up if you don't know what it is. Explaining why I Googled it was rather awkward, but I did not lose my job, fortunately. Well, I looked it up, and I don't know what I expected, but it was not that. And if you are like, well, tell us what it means, Mainly Facts guy. No. If you want to know, you go ahead and look it up yourself. Story 24. I worked as a media buyer, and on my third day on the job, my boss asked me to find some information and update the huge spreadsheet he was working on for the client's annual plan. As I was about to update it, he opened the file to finish a few things and asked me to wait. Now, I'm the new girl wanting to show service. I decide to open a copy of the spreadsheet and update it there, so when he finishes, I know where it goes. He finishes, lets me know I can open the file, I just get mine updated and save on top of his work. I basically made him lose his entire day of work. The year-round spreadsheet was ready, and the one I had was a rough draw. I really thought he was going to throw his monitor on my head. He changed colors and had to leave the office in order not to curse me. I apologized the next day, so did he, and we agreed to always save versions from that day on. Story 25. So I work at a bank. Within my first 2 weeks, I left my money out. Now, normally if the drawer was locked, it wouldn't be a big deal, but I didn't do that. I just left a pile of cash roughly valued at $20,000 in 2 drawers out for an entire effing weekend. And nobody found it from Friday morning to Monday evening. Story 26. Elbowed a kid in the face and burst his nose. I'm rather tall, 6'5", and the kid had wandered up behind me to ask a question. I turned around and his face happened to be on the perfect level for my elbow to make contact with it. Story 27. Line cook at a restaurant. One of my managers was a black lady and we could rib each other about ethnicities. I'm half Mexican, and one day she says, "America loves Mexicans more than black people." I said, "BS, we have to sneak our way across the border any way we can, and you all got a free cruise." She got a blank expression on her face. I looked at the guy next to me, and he had the, "Well, it's been nice having you around," look on his face. I look back at her and just grin because that's all I can do at this point. She slowly reaches out her hand and gives me a fist bump and commends me on my comeback. Didn't get fired. I did close down later, though. Oh well. Story 28. I was surfing the net on Friday afternoon when I really needed to be finishing a couple of projects. I had just entered my 20th thread when, oh crap, here comes the boss. I'll be right back. Story 29. Not me, but my coworker. I work at a hotel and she is in housekeeping. She went into a room to strip it of dirty linen, washed her hands, and left the hot water tap running. 3 rooms were flooded because of that. So was the sink clogged, or did she put a stopper in the sink to wash her hands? If it is the first, that isn't totally her fault, but if it is the second, is that something people do? If so, why? Story 30. I walk into a liquor shop where I worked for a few years and there's some clown behind the register. Turns out he's the new owner. Old owner decided to let us figure it out the hard way that we were out of a job. But. Story 31. I worked at McDonald's in high school and was on the midnight shift with a very lax manager. We decided to make a prank call. I honestly don't remember the bit, but I know I had to call someone that boarded horses. Anyway, I forgot to block the store's number. The person I pranked kept calling back every 10 minutes. My manager talked to them and tried to calm them down, but they kept calling until morning until they talked to the store manager. I didn't get fired, but I got demoted from my crew trainer position, which is even better for the purpose of the story. McDonald's fires thousands of people every year, but how many have been demoted? Story 32. When I was younger, I worked at a small pet shop on the Central Coast. We sold mainly saltwater and some freshwater fish. Also, we sold premixed saltwater to customers that didn't have time to make their own. One of my tasks was to make sure the beta bowls got cleaned and the water was changed. We kept a bunch of blue jugs in the back room that were always used for water changes. They were usually filled with fresh water so we could top off the fish tanks. So I go about my day like usual and start cleaning the bowls. We had about 40 betas in stock at the time. I cleaned the bowls and replaced the water and moved on to help customers that started coming in. About an hour later, I come and find most of them belly up and half dead. Nobody told me that the blue jugs had salt water in them. My boss had filled them up a day before and forgot to tell everybody. I didn't get fired, but I did feel bad about the poor fish. From that day, I was known as the Beta Killer. Ugh, that wouldn't be so bad of a nickname, except it sounds like it should be the title of one of those alpha male podcasts. Welcome back to Beta Killer. On today's episode, I'll showcase a lack of understanding of biology and psychology that would embarrass a 5th grader, while my co-host will just mindlessly yes man in a pathetic attempt to latch on to what minuscule fame I've acquired among the dregs of the internet. Story 33. Reenact the Jack I'm Flying scene from the Titanic in a shopping trolley. The managers gave us both a copy of the security footage. Story 34. Years ago, when I first started at the dealership I now run, I was working in sales. We had this skeevy douchebag of a lot attendant who went to school with my younger sister. For whatever reason, he was always talking about how he wanted to F her and tell me she was a W. I just ignored it. One day, he caught me at the wrong time and made a smart comment, and I beat the living crap out of him right there in the showroom. Shortly thereafter, the dealer principal called me into his office. I walked in and said, "I beat up Ronnie today." And he replied, "Sometimes we have to resort to violence for our family, but I called you in to ask about random car deal I was working at the time." Story 35. My office has a private IM system we use to communicate with each other. Something like my second week of working there, I went to a coworker who I was getting to be friends with a comment making fun of the VP's outfit that day. Except I accidentally IM'd the VP instead. He didn't laugh it off either. He just got really awkward in that, "Oh, I'll just brush it off, but secretly I'm really peed" sort of way. Shockingly, I did not get fired and still work there 6 years later. Story 36. Bussing tables/washing dishes at a steakhouse, the kitchen floor was absolutely slick as soon as the place got even a little busy. I was coming back with a tray of glasses and heard this huge crash. I look around like a doofus wondering what happened, then slowly realize I'm sitting on the floor next to a pile of broken glass. Consequence? Got a better job a week later and quit. Story 37. Here is my recent one, like yesterday, 2 days before my boss assigned me a task. I completed the task, replied all to her original email with saying, "Hey, here's my task, it is done." Apparently, I shouldn't have replied all. So instead of telling me that she added the head of the company in HR and told me never to send an email like that ever again and she only asked for my support, she is the lead on this project. Now keep in mind this task was simple, meaning tracking down clothing and marking on a document if they were in-house or had to be ordered from the warehouse. So flash forward to Thursday. I'm asking for a meeting to discuss this email. I'm confused. The HR woman is confused. She even came into my office and admitted that she read the email over and over and has no idea what I did wrong. Then, boom, I'm fired for my attitude. First time I've ever been fired in my whole life. I've never once gotten reprimanded or scolded in any job I have ever had. So drink one for me, Imgur. It's been a crappy week. The only silver lining is that someone quitted because I was fired, so I feel like Jerry Maguire. Where's my bag of fish? What? I've never seen Jerry Maguire, so I don't get what that was about. The rest of it sounds pretty par for the course. You did nothing wrong, but kind of made your boss look a little less good, so she canned you. Sorry to hear about it, but that crap happens. Story 38. My supervisor used construction work and he and another guy were working on a second-story roof when the guy peed off my supervisor who proceeded to throw him off the roof. When he walked downstairs, his boss met him at the door and said, "You know you're fired, right?" My supervisor looked at him and said, "Yeah, I figured that when I threw him down." Story 39. I got a summer job working for a new start web company dealing with used automobiles. My manager was a colossal C. Anyway, the website was crap and he was supposed to change it, but didn't. I asked my cousin, a web developer, to look at it for improvements and he showed me how to hack into it. One night I got drunk and changed the featured vehicle on the front page to a big black veiny dildo with the registration plate D1LDO. And he found out it was me. I walked in, said, "My bad, I better quit really." 2 weeks later, after I quit, I heard the said manager had stolen the major investor's spare car, bankrupted the company, and was drunk on the phone telling the investor he would stab him if he tried to get his car back. It was a really healthy working environment. Story 40. I worked at a paintball field owned by a very religious man, and this day we had a group of Baptists playing that was mostly 10 to 14-year-old kids. I got a chance to hop in and play at the end of the day, so I did. I ran up the center, got shot in the shoulder, and went to walk back to the dead box when the kids on my own team lit me up. So what did I do? Yelled, "Jesus F, I'm on your team!" and then threw my gun at the net. I still had the job because my boss is very forgiving, but damn, that was close. Here I was, all ready to hear about you going on a Rambo-like rampage, just destroying some tweens, going completely rogue. The fact that you didn't after you were betrayed like that? you missed a good opportunity to let off a little steam. Story 41. I worked at a surf shop for 2 days after college. It was the most mundane crap ever. I basically just walked around looking for shirts to fold all day long. On the third day, they asked me to go drive to work at one of their other stores about 10 miles down the road. When I got there, they told me to change shoes because I was wearing sandals. This wasn't an issue at the other store, it was a goddamn surf shop. While I was driving back home to get shoes, I got a call to interview for a more legitimate job. At that point, I just said F it and didn't go back. I ended up getting another job. Story 42. Teaching first grade and 2 of my kids got into a fist fight on the carpet. I immediately run over and pull them apart and the principal walks in. The kids are taken out of my room and I think, crap, I'm gone. As we were warned to never touch students. Got fired a couple days later. Story 43. My boss and coworker have the same name. After I lost a big client a few years ago, I got a call from what I thought was my coworker and told him I lost a client and said it was my boss's fault for not giving me enough time and rushing the deadline. He didn't say a word till I got back to the office. Thank God he is my sister's college friend. Story 44. Where I used to work, I would pick on some of the staff I'd gotten along with. One night, I had just finished talking to the general manager when my coworker came by. We pick on each other a bit, and she says, "Geez, Carino, why do you always pick on me and not the general manager?" I casually said, "Well, that's because I like you." I'm never going to live that down. Honestly, if I were the general manager, I would have laughed at that. You picked on the general manager in a fun way, and if they had fired you for that, that is probably someone you wouldn't want to be working for anyway. Story 45. I am a beverage cart girl at a golf course. One slow day, I was booking it around the cart path, looking out at the course, not down at the path, and bam, I hit the curb. This jerked the cart up onto the hill, and before I knew it, the cart and all the contents were on top of me. Luckily, I had my phone on me, so I called for help. The chef, GM, and manager had to lift the cart off me. It was my very first ambulance ride. I thought for sure I was going to get fired. I totaled a beverage cart and cost them several thousands in doctor bills because of workers' comp. But instead, they paid me for the rest of the day, and I'm full-time now. Story 46. I forwarded a meeting invite for a client meeting to my boss that said, "This woman is up my butt and I need some support here because she won't leave me the hell alone until we actually help her." In the end, it turns out it wasn't sent to her, but the format of Outlook makes it look like her updated notes about meeting invites go to everyone, and I believed it went to her. I had a full-blown panic attack and started sobbing under my desk. Story 47. A few years back, I was collecting a customer's car to deliver to their home on the back of my recovery truck. I'd never driven a car quite so powerful as this before, and driving it onto the back of the truck, gave it a little too much gas, panicked, missed the brake, slipped back onto the accelerator, putting the car into the back of the truck cab and causing 4,000 pounds worth of damage to the truck and 25,000 pounds worth of damage to the brand new Aston Martin DB9. Story 48. Work as an IT assistant. There was a box of very important equipment that went missing that totaled a little over $4,000. Though not in my job description, I'm considered the office organizer. I'd never seen the box in my life, yet everyone is pointing fingers at me. The good news was that I didn't/haven't lost my job. The bad news was/is the team will, deep down, always believe it's my fault the box went missing despite the fact that I have never even seen it. There was a TLDR on this story that I didn't record because the story is like 4 sentences long. I'm sorry, but if that is too long for anyone, then frankly, so is a TLDR. Story 49. Worked in a private clinic medical. My boss had asked me to send a picture of a port on my home PC for some reason I don't remember at the time. I got home, took a picture of it, and sent it to my boss, and then promptly realized not only was it a picture of the port, but also the massive bong in the background. I sweated it out that night and was sure I'd get reprimanded or fired the next day. Story 50. Worked as a high school teacher. Called home to chat about a student's behavior. Left a polite voicemail when no one answered. Proceeded to think that I hung up the phone. Looked over at my colleague and started swearing up a storm about this kid. Saw the phone lights still on. Had a small heart attack. Are you a character in a sitcom? Because that's about the only place stuff like that happens. You all need to learn to be more paranoid about this stuff. Like me. I'm never not anxious, and it's great. Story 51. When I was a teenager, I worked at the movie theater. Quite a large theater, 20 screens. One night I was up front to the box office, and it was an insanely busy night. A clearly homeless man walks up and asks me to exchange his rolled coin for bills, and I told him, "No, you'll have to get manager approval." He disappears for a while and returns, saying he had spoke with a manager who had approved it. I was so flustered I didn't think, grabbed the roll marked 10 and gave him $60 out of my till. In the back room, at the end of the night, I broke them open and obviously they were full of pennies. I thought for sure I was a goner, but the float for the day was over by quite a bit and it only ended up in the negative by a small amount. They called me Dimes from then onwards. Looking back, I cringed so hard at my stupidity, but lesson learned, I guess. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.